Bodies of the three missing police officers were positively identified by their families last night. The remains of Constable Keamogetswe Buys, Constable Boipelo Senoge and Constable Cebekhulu were discovered yesterday in the Hennops River in Centurion. Now, investigations into their disappearance began 6 days ago after they were last seen en route to Limpopo from the Free State to start their deployment. 2 other bodies were also found, but police say that that discovery is not linked to the case of the officers. The gruesome discovery has left their families with more questions than answers about their deaths. So to try and make sense of these developments, we're joined virtually now by Dr Simon Howell, a senior researcher at the Centre for Criminology at the University of Cape Town. So Dr Howell, firstly, what did you make of yesterday's developments and the discovery of 5 bodies after, of course, what started out as a search for perhaps 3 people in the police constables who went missing last week?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to ascertain whether they are related to one another or not, in the sense that, that they're a similar crime event. But, it raises a number of worries around the safety of citizens more broadly and the safety of law enforcement officials, in that when they investigated these initial 3 deaths, they simply found another 2 bodies. So it's significant in the sense that there shouldn't be that many bodies lying around in the rivers of South Africa, frankly.
And I suppose many people looking at that very same issue. But then also, the 3 bodies were found of the 3 missing police constables. And this, we know that the police were actively searching for those 3 constables. But then the car that they were traveling in, that has still not yet been found. And, one listens to, you hear so many questions. One of the family members of one of the deceased last night, when they were taken to that scene, also questioning the police top brass about the absence of that car. So looking at that crime scene, what was explained to them, was there anything that stood out for you?
Well, I think, key here is the use of cell phone tracking and the use of the tracking device within the car to discover the location. When they left on their way from the Free State to Joburg, they, as far as I understand, the tracking device was turned off and the like, but they've managed to use the cell phone data to locate the individuals, or locate approximately where the people were. So in that instance, I think that the work has been done, but there's ongoing concerns around the way in which that data has been used, and the timeliness of the use of the data so as to track the individuals, because obviously they have clearly got there too late in terms of whatever has happened has happened.
And that was one of the other questions that seemed to come up, the fact that it had taken 6 days using that very data. Are you able to explain to us, in terms of perhaps the procedure to access that data and how long that takes and how that comes into play when there is a live crime situation? And I'm not saying that, this was, in fact, anything sinister, but there were 3 people missing and it took almost a week to locate them.
Sure. So, in South Africa, it is possible to track people's location via their cell phone, in conjunction with the cell phone companies, Vodacom, NTN and the like. To do so, typically a SABC officer needs to go through a judicial process where they have to claim or obtain a warrant from a judge or a magistrate that authorizes them to do that triangulation. This doesn't rely on a GPS so much as it relies on the cell phone towers to triangulate the approximate location. Of course, the police can, in certain instances, undertake tracking of cell phone devices without a warrant, but they have to claim a warrant retrospectively within 48 hours, as per RICA and other statutes. So, it is possible. Of course, why it took 6 days to undertake this is the big question now, is considering A, that these were law enforcement officials themselves, but B, also, it doesn't take that long to do this type of work. And typically it can be done without even a warrant. And, that warrant needs to be applied for in retrospect, but that doesn't stop people from doing this in the first place.
And that leads to questions about the contamination of that scene. Again, we saw that barrier, and that was spoken about, alleged that perhaps that is where the car that the officers were traveling in may have gone off the road. These are the allegations and, what is suspected to possibly have happened. But then something like that, again, in South Africa, is there nobody tracking what is going on? Especially in an instance like this. So if someone just rams into a barrier, nobody follows up to find out what has happened. Is that how things are done?
Well, the vehicle was fitted with a tracking device, but that was turned off. So, in that instance, typically, if the tracking device was on, it may have sensed that there would have been an accident or whatever happened. But it speaks to a broader societal concern, is that a car clearly, if the car left the road and went through a barrier, there's clear signs of that occurring. And of course, the onus is on the public to report crimes like that, or not, to report incidents like that to the police and to the authorities, so as that people can follow up. And if no one had reported that and no one had suspected anything had occurred because even though the barrier was broken, that of course speaks to a deeper concern around our understandings of each other and our perspectives on the world. Because if the barrier is broken and no one reports it, of course that there's a key concern there around the way in which we understand our own infrastructure and the way in which we understand what may have occurred and whether we feel any responsibility to report crime or report incidents.
And the contamination then of that scene, given that it has taken so long. I heard, for example, people yesterday asking about the media, families and others being allowed around that. But it's 6 days later. How important is it to still continue to preserve the scene once the police became aware that this is where something occurred?
Well, there would have been a substantial amount of contamination in the 6 days prior to this. And of course, that is of a concern in the sense that, both in terms of the bodies themselves, but also in terms of any vehicles or any evidence that may have been washed downstream. Those 6 days would have been critical to finding that evidence, and that they are now protecting the scene afterwards, I think is sort of a last-ditch attempt to keep whatever evidence may still exist there. But frankly, after 6 days in a river, a lot of evidence would have gone missing already. So, anything that is done now is essentially just trying to guard whatever may still exist. And of course, we don't know whether this was an accident or whether it was a crime scene, but I sense that, SAPS did release a 350,000 rand finder's fee. So essentially, the question, I don't think they really know at this moment what is going on in terms of whether this is a pure accident or whether there was suspicious activity involved.
And of course, the absence of the vehicle that the three were traveling in. And again, there was another vehicle that was found in the river. And as a criminologist, I just want to ask you about this, because some people were saying the explanation was given last night to the families that some of the bodies were actually trapped by some of the debris in the river. Another body, the one that they found yesterday, was found further downstream. So how is it that all three bodies were out of the car and the car is missing? Would you have any sort of explanation for that sort of phenomenon, especially considering there was another car that was also found, but the driver of that car found there with his car or in close proximity? So what could the possible explanation be for this missing car?
Well, on the one hand, that two cars were found in the same river at approximately the same time. That, of course, raises suspicions. It's irrespective of how busy that road is and whether the barriers exist or not. That two cars were found in the same river, and that in both instances people had died, of course, raises concerns. That the bodies and the car were not found together in the instance of the law enforcement officials. It depends on whether it was an accident or whether it was purposeful or not. If it was an accident and no one was wearing seatbelts and the doors were not locked, perhaps it could have occurred that the people were thrown from the vehicle. Had it been a suspicious event, the people may have been taken out of the vehicle either alive or after or had they been hurt or killed, then that may have occurred as well. So there are multiple explanations. For me, the suspicion is that it's quite extraordinary that two vehicles were found in the same river around the same time, and that in both instances people had died. And whether the bodies are recovered with the vehicle or not, of course, depends on how the events unfolded. And no one has reported any information about those events, we don't really know what has occurred.
And just a final question around the other body, the fifth body, and that was said to have been in an advanced stage of decomposition. Again, people, don't we report people missing, and does law enforcement actually actively look out to try and recover people? How does it work? Where are we in South Africa at the moment?
Well, I mean, in terms of monitoring people, it's beyond the capabilities of SAPS to monitor everyone all the time. If the vehicles are fitted with devices, tracker devices, then, it's up to the private companies to monitor those vehicles. If they are monitoring a vehicle that is displaying that it is in a river and it's been there for the last 6 days or so, then, of course, I think, some action should have been taken. But, for me, the onus is on the public to report incidences when they occur. If I'm not sure of the state that the bridge was in before all of these incidents occurred, but if there were barriers in place and those barriers had been built and maintained, then it would have been obvious that a vehicle had gone over the river, and that, the onus is then on the public to report that to the officials. Had no one reported it, of course, that either suggests that the barriers in the road and the infrastructure was in such a state that it was not noticeable in the first place, or that just simply no one really bothered. And I'm not sure, because I don't live there. I don't know the state of the bridge beforehand, but it may be simply that the infrastructure was so run down that it just no one even noticed, even though a car had gone off, or 2 cars had gone off the road there.
Well, of course, we wait to hear from the police exactly what has transpired. Their autopsy reports also still outstanding. But Dr. Simon Howell, thank you so much for your time this morning. Senior researcher at the Centre for Criminology at the University of Cape Town, talking to us about the discovery of those 5 bodies yesterday, 3 positively identified as the remains of the missing SAPS officers who were missing, and another SAPS official from Littleton.